What's up guys, welcome to another episode of the Baby Daddy. Today we're doing a DIY project and we are making this beauty right here, which is a Pikler ladder with a slide attachment. Now Pikler ladders are great toys for your little ones. They're great for those sensory activities as well as to help develop those motor skills. I'm going to show you guys exactly the materials I use, the hardware I use, the tools I used, and it's a pretty thorough video overall. I hope you guys enjoy it if you make it yourself, so let's get into it now. All right, so here's the material that you're gonna need to build the Pikler ladder itself. You're gonna need 2 3/4 inch by 2.5 inch by 72 inch long oak board, 1 3/4 inch by 10 inch by 20 inch long oak board, 13 1 inch by 36 inch long sanded Oak Dowels, and 4 5/8 inch by 36 inch long poplar squares. That's exactly what you're going to need to build the Pikler ladder itself. If you do want to go with the optional slide, what I ended up going with was an oak stair step. You can find these at Lowe's, Home Depot, and I ended up going with the stair step versus an actual board because mainly it was a little bit cheaper to go with the stair step. Now there is a rounded side on one of the sides, and what we're going to do is we're just going to cut that off, sand it down to match nicely with the other side. So that's exactly what you guys will need. So let's show you the tools that you'll need to put this together. All right, here are the tools that I use to make the Pikler ladder. Now keep in mind, not all of these tools are necessary when you're doing this project. I just found that it made my life a whole lot easier having these tools available to me. As you can see, I'm a huge Ryobi fan. I think they make great products, and they had everything I needed to complete this project. Now, if you do not have these tools available to you, they are available to rent at Home Depot, Lowe's, or if you have a buddy that has a lot of tools themselves, just give them a call up and just say, hey buddy, can I borrow these tools? I had a friend that did that and he was able to build the ladder and didn't have a tool available to him. Now the things that I use to make this ladder are a jigsaw, a circular saw, table clamps. Now these are one of the tools that aren't super important to have. I just found it made my life a whole lot easier when doing the project. You can also use a friend that has a really strong grip to hold the pieces of wood down for you. A sander, a power sander, or if you don't have a power sander, you can always use a hand sander, a power drill, and a miter saw. These are the tools that I used. Now let's get into making the actual Pikler ladder. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is take one of your longer 72-inch boards, and for the shorter side of the Pikler ladder, the 2 shorter legs, you're going to want to measure out about 32 inches for each of the legs. So we have 32 inches, make my mark, and then what I also like to do is just take my ruler and draw a straight line across. And old saying, measure twice, cut once, and you're right on 32 inches. Perfect. All right, for the longer side of the Pikler ladder, the 2 longer legs, what you're going to want to measure out is 2 36-inch legs, or 3 feet. All right, 36 inches. Make my mark. Measure it twice. Perfect, 36 inches. Now also, don't worry about the pencil marks that you make. We're gonna sand that out later. Okay, now that we have our measurements done, let's cut them to size. Now, anytime you are using your power tools, do not forget to wear your safety glasses. Very important. All right, now that we have our legs all cut, let's go ahead and cut our 2 triangles. Okay, so the next step is you're gonna take your oak board and we're gonna measure out 2 9 by 10 inch squares, and these are what we're gonna use for the triangles for the Pikler ladder. Okay, so let's cut the squares and then we'll turn them into triangles. Safety glasses on. All right, we just cut our 9-inch side. Now let's cut our 10-inch side, and then we'll move on to the second square. All right, now that we have our 2 squares, let's turn them into triangles. Okay, now that we have our squares cut, on the side that is 10 inches long, what you're going to want to do is measure to the exact center, which is about 5 inches. So I'm going to make my mark. Okay, now that we found the center, what you're going to want to do is grab one of the legs that you cut or a ruler, and you're going to want to take a rough line. Now it is important to be pretty precise in this step, not as much as the angle that you cut it at, but you want to make sure that both of your triangles are the exact same size. If they're differ even in the slightest, you're going to get a little bit of a wobble inside of your Pikler triangle, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm just taking one of the legs that I cut to give me a nice straight edge, taking the square, and I'm just going from the center out to the tip and going again from the center out to the tip. So now when I cut, that should give me a nice isosceles triangle and give me a pretty nice precise cut at about a 30-degree angle. Okay, so I have my square all set up. I have my miter saw set to a 30-degree angle. I have the center tip right at the top. I'm going to put my safety glasses on, and we're going to give this a cut. Now that we have this cut, and again, don't worry sometimes about if you have little chips or anything like that, because we're gonna round the edges off later. But what I find easy to do sometimes is, since we're gonna cut on the opposite side, instead of switching your miter blade around a bunch of times, what I like to do is I just take the piece I just cut, match it up to the corner, take my pencil, make a line, and now I have another line to follow. So I have my little laser light to guide me, and we're going to make the cut. Okay, there we have our first triangle. So let's go ahead and do the second one, and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, now that we have both triangles cut, again, you want to make sure that they are precisely the same size. If they're not, go ahead and sand them down to make sure that they are exactly the same height, size, and everything. So what we're going to do now is round off the corners to make it look nice and pretty. Okay, here's another area where you guys want to be pretty precise. What we're going to do now is we are going to round off the corners of our triangles as well as our legs. Now, it doesn't really matter the degree at which you angle your triangle and your legs. The only thing that you really want to make sure of is that the degree that you use on your triangle is the exact same degree that you use on your legs. Okay, so instead of using some fancy compass or these rulers that I picked up at Target, I found that I was drinking some Starbucks while I was making this, and I found that the bottom of the cup was a perfect circle and something that would stay consistent for this project. So I'm going to use the bottom of the cup just to show you that you can really use anything that you want to make the degree exactly the same. So let's use the cup. So I'm just going to take this to the top, and I'm going to make my mark. And then I'm going to do the same for my leg. Okay, so you want to repeat the same step for each side of your leg and your triangle. Now the bottom part of the triangle, you want to make sure you have that same angle for at least the top part. The bottom two sides you can leave square if you want to, or leave it as is. What I like to do is just round them off. And that's just to make sure it looks nice at the end of the project. Okay, so now that I've made all of my markings with the bottom of my Starbucks cup, what we're going to do now is we are going to trim everything off with our jigsaw. Now again, this step you can be a little rough with it. The jigsaw makes it a lot easier. You can use a handsaw, whatever you prefer. Jigsaw obviously makes it easier for me, but we're going to round everything off. Don't worry about being too smooth with it because we're going to sand it right after. Okay, so here's one of the areas that the clamps do come in really handy. If you don't have clamps, you can have somebody else hold the back for you, or if you have a strong enough grip, boom, you can hold it yourself. I like to use the clamps. It just makes the cutting easier, and I don't have to worry about the board shifting back and forth on me. All right, so just finished up all the legs. Now let's move on to the triangles. All right, now that we got our triangle in place, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that the two top pieces are gonna have the exact same angle, and then the two bottom pieces we're just gonna round off just to make sure they look nice. All right, now that we have both of our triangles done, what we are going to do is we are going to stand them up all together, make sure all the sides are sanded nice and evenly, and then we'll show you the next steps. Okay, the next step in the project is making sure that the legs are the exact same size, and an easy way to do that is when you clamp them down, just line them up together. And what's going to happen is when we start to sand it off, if one leg's longer than the other, the power sander is going to make a really nice smooth finish on both of the legs, and they're going to make sure both the legs are the exact same size. I clamped it down on this table so that way I can do one side and then the other side at the exact same time. All right, so now that both sides are nice and even and nice and smooth, we're going to move on now to the triangles. Okay, now that we have the triangles clamped in place, the idea here is to make sure both sides are nice and smooth, but we want to make sure that both triangles are the exact same size. Again, if they're not the exact same size, when we put the Pikler triangle together at the end, it's going to wobble back and forth. So the goal here is to make sure the triangles are the exact same size. Okay, everything is nice and sanded now. Everything is nice and even on both our triangles. So this is going to make for a nice and stable Pikler ladder. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna want to do is take the legs, both long and short, and we're gonna drill holes or pockets for the actual dowels to sit in. What I'm using for this project is a 1-inch Forstner bit. Now you can go up in size a little bit if you can find something maybe slightly larger than a 1-inch. It's just going to make that much easier to put the dowel in. What I found by using the 1-inch dowel is I had to use a mallet and tap it in a little bit. It was a little bit more of a snug fit, but the 1 inch works great for me. So to start, I've already pre-marked these legs, but what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find first the exact center of your leg, and then what I like to do is once I find the exact center, I just take another piece of wood or really anything with a straight edge, and then you want to take your pencil and then just mark that edge off. Now again, most of this is going to be sanded off after the finished project, so don't worry about making, you know, extra little lines. I still have stickers on some of the legs. So that's what you're going to want to do with the first step of the leg. Now the second step, once you find the center, is on the longer leg, you're going to start off from the very top of your Pikler ladder. You're going to start off and mark 1 1/4 inch. Okay, and then you're just going to take your ruler or your straight line and then just mark that off. Once you have that marked off at 1 1/4 inch, you're going to go down every 5 inches and mark off another intersection. At the end, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intersections on your longer leg. Now, when we go over to the shorter leg, and again, I've marked this one already, again, you're going to find the exact center. You're going to take a straight edge and you're going to mark down the middle. And that's just to make sure it's consistent. When we put the dowel in on this side, it's going to match up nicely with this side. And that's again why we wanted to make sure everything was rounded off and even in the beginning. Now on the shorter side, you're going to take your ruler and from the top again, you're going to mark off 2 1/4 inch and make your intersection. And again, you're going to go down every 5 inches. Now at the end on your shorter leg, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intersections on your shorter leg. Now let's connect our Forstner bit and make our pockets. Okay, now that I have my Forstner bit attached, what I like to do and what is good practice is I take one of the spare pieces of wood that I have left over from my cuts, and what I like to do is just do a couple practice runs just to make sure I get the exact depth, because the last thing that you want to do is punch a hole straight through the legs. You're going to end up having to buy another leg, and not to say the project's ruined, but you're going to have to fall back a couple steps and again buy another leg and start all over. So it's good to just take one of the spare boards, do a couple practice runs, know exactly how deep you can go, and once you get the hang of it, then you can move on to the leg. So again, we're going to take one of the legs, and then at the intersections, again, that's why we marked it off. So you want to stay consistent along every intersection to make sure in the finished project, when we put the legs together, everything is nice and level and looks good. So we're going to make the first hole, and then I'm going to find the intersection, be as level as possible. All right, and there we have our first hole. So I'm going to make the rest and then we'll go on to the next step. So I just finished with the first leg, and a little side note that I thought was actually kind of cool is I know a lot of people purchase on the internet, you know, cedar chips and things of that sort. This is going to make really good size cedar chips that you could use for another project or whatever you have it, and it smells great being fresh cedar. So just a little side note. Okay, so now that we made all of our pocket holes, what we're going to do now is we are going to take our sander and we are going to sand all of our legs and our triangles. That's going to take away any stray pieces of wood that may splinter out, which we don't want. It's also going to take away all the pencil markings that we made. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to go around the edges of each of our legs and triangles and make sure we take anything out with a 90-degree angle or any sharp edges. Once that's done, we're going to go on to the next step and start putting this ladder together. Okay, so the next step in the project is cutting our oak dowels to size. Now, they do come pre-sanded already, but what I would recommend is if you do want to give them a little extra sanding, if they're a little rough, I would do it in this step, because once it's attached to the ladder, it's going to make it that much more difficult. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your 13 oak dowels and you're going to measure out to 29.5 inches. So once we find that, we're going to measure out to 29.5 inches. I already found the mark on this one. You're going to mark that off. We're going to cut them down to size, and you're going to do that for all 13. Once we do that, we're going to get started on attaching it to the actual legs themselves. Okay, now that we have everything all sanded, our oak dowels are cut to size, the next step of the project is actually taking the oak dowels and fastening them to the legs themselves. Now, this is one step in the project that you may want to ask for some assistance on. You may want to partner, or you can utilize your table clamps. What that's going to help you out with is when you are attaching the legs to the legs themselves, the first thing that you want to do is drill a pilot hole. Now, the reason you want to drill a pilot hole and you don't want to just start drilling directly into the leg is it's going to help guide the screw through the leg so you don't go off at an angle, and it helps prevent any type of cracks. What I'm using for this project is 2.5 inch all-purpose power screws. Now, I picked these up from Lowe's. What I wouldn't recommend for this project, since I am using oak and oak is a hardwood, you don't want to use any type of just standard wood screw. If you do use a standard wood screw, you do run the risk of the screw actually snapping while you're putting it through, and you're going to run into a lot of frustrations. Now, also, don't go anything under 2 inches for attaching the legs to the dowels, and the reason for that is you do want some stability, since your little ones are going to be climbing all over this ladder. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to start attaching the legs to the dowels, drilling my pilot holes, screwing them into place, and once we're done, I'll show you exactly what it looks like, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now, I've created the pilot holes in all of my legs, and one optional step that you can use is I use a countersink bit, and I drill it into the back of the pilot holes that I made. And what that's going to do is it's going to make a nice little pocket for the screws to sit in. Now, you want to make sure that you use a bit that's roughly about the size of the head of the screw that you're going to use. Again, this is going to prevent cracking, and it's going to give the head of the screw a nice place to sit in on the wood, so it's nice and flush at the end of your project. So I'm going to make my countersink holes, and then we're going to start attaching the legs and show you what that looks like right after. Okay, now we have our two sides of the Pikler ladder all set up. Legs are screwed into place. Everything is nice and sturdy. What we're going to do now is we're going to show you how to attach it to the triangle and then put the rest of the ladder together. Okay, so once the legs are completed, what you're going to want to do next is take the triangle, and the longer piece, or the longer part of the Pikler ladder, the longer legs, is going to sit right along the edge of the triangle. This is going to be the piece that's going to hinge back and forth. But once that's on, what you're going to do next is position the smaller piece, or the side with the shorter legs. And what's going to happen is when the Pikler ladder opens up, it's going to rest on the shorter side. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our screws and fasten it into the Pikler ladder, into the triangle piece. What I'm using for this is the same construction screw, but I'm using about 1 1/4 inch screw for this piece. And then we'll go on to the hinge side next, and we'll show you exactly what to do. Okay, now that we have our shorter leg fastened to the triangle, what we're going to do now on the longer side is we are going to drill a hole straight through, somewhere in this general area. Now this is an area that you may want to play with opening and closing to see exactly where you want to put your pivot screw. Generally you want to opt in for about midway through, opt in for maybe a little bit higher than lower, just to make it that much easier and make sure the entire ladder closes nice and tightly for you when you are storing it away. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drill all the way through, and we're going to take our 1.5 inch pivot screw, put it through there, do it on the other side, and we should be all set to go. Okay, now that we're done with the Pikler ladder, we're going to move on now to doing the slide. Now again, this is an optional step. You do not have to do the slide if you choose not to. We're going to go ahead and make the slide now. So again, for the slide, I ended up using an oak stair step. Reason being was, again, it was a little bit cheaper than using an actual oak board. Now it does have one rounded edge on the stair that in the beginning of the video, I said I was going to use a circular saw and chop that off. I ended up liking the way that it looked, so I'm going to keep it on. So the first step, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the entire stair is sanded down to make it nice and smooth, because the little ones are going to be using it as a slide. We're also going to take off all 90-degree edges and make sure they're nice and rounded off and nice and smooth. The next step is we are going to take our poplar cubes that we had, or poplar boards, and we're going to make sure that it is cut to the exact width of our slide itself. And we're going to do one for one side and one for the other side. So what I did is I already cut these down to size. And you're going to put those into place. You're going to give about maybe 1 inch, 2 inches gap from the top of it. Now the first step you want to do is fasten first the top of the poplar board to the oak slide. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take one of your scrap pieces of dowel and you want to place that in between the top piece and the bottom piece of the attachment. Now the reason that you want to do that is because this piece is going to be attaching to the Pikler ladder itself, and where it's going to attach is on one of the oak posts. So makes sense that it's going to have that perfect gap. So we're going to nail these into place, or screw these into place, and then I'll show you exactly what it looks like when we're done. Okay, so now that I have my poplar boards in place, I like to always just double check myself. I take one of the scrap Oak Dowels, I place it right in the middle of it, just to make sure that once I attach it to the Pikler ladder itself, it's going to fit nice and snug and not move around a bunch. Now the reason I do it on both sides and not just one side is because what I like to do is, when you're done with the actual slide, having a reverse to it is always a little bit more fun, gives the kids a little bit more activity. So what I also like to do, and what I'm going to do as a final step to my project, is I'm going to take the pieces of scrap wood, cut them down to size, make them fun little shapes, mainly triangles, and I'm going to wood glue it all along the other side of the slide. And what that's going to do, it's going to give like a little rock climbing wall for the little ones to play with. And that way I'll have one side that's a rock climbing wall and another side that's an actual slide. So I'm gonna go attach this to the slide, to the Pikler ladder now, and see how it looks. All right guys, there we have it. Congratulations if you made it yourself. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is what the Pikler ladder looks like with the slide attachment. Now what I mentioned earlier in the video is, if you have any spare pieces of wood, what you can do is sand them down, glue them onto the other side of the slide, and now you have a reversible slide with a little rock climbing wall attachment. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hit that like button, hit subscribe if you guys want to see more videos, and we'll see you next time on The Baby Daddy. All right guys, so now that we're at the end of the video, here's a little tip and trick that you can use for your leftover wood chips from all your cuts. What I like to do is add the wood chips to the top layer of my soil on all my interior house plants. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna act as a natural bug repellent. And not only that, as the wood chips break down, it actually adds nutrients to your soil. So cool little tip and trick for the end of our video. Have a good one. Are you ready to play on it? Yeah? Do you like the cowboy hat or no? Yeah? Whoa! That's cool, huh? So cool.